Welcome in, everyone. Welcome back to your favorite fantasy football show. Isaac Durham here alongside Tarian Rogers, and we are your fantasy GMs. Today, we will recap week 3, go over waiver wires, start and sit 'em, streaming options. But first, let's start out with the least exciting part of the show, Tarian, who to cut from your fantasy teams. So there's some big name players who have been disappointing thus far. I'm getting a lot of text messages. Should I drop this guy? Should I drop that guy? I was like, I'll get back to you. I'm going to see what my man Tarian thinks about it. So I'm going to give you a few names, and then you tell me if you're willing to cut them. Sound good?
Okay, for sure. Let's do it.
Ronald Jones.
I'm cutting him. I'm not 100. I haven't been 100% confident on him all year. We've seen Giovanni Bernard join the party this week. And with that being said, Leonard Fournette's going to get the goal line carries. I just have a hard time figuring out what Ronald Jones's role is, and I don't feel like he's a consistent week by week option. So yeah, I'm getting rid of him.
Well, it sounds like he's in the doghouse right now.
Yeah.
He fumbled in week 1, and then we heard Bruce Arians said, hey, he's going to start in week 2, and everyone's like, really? Like, the last time we heard, you were all mad at him, and then he did start him technically, but Fournette easily out-carried him in the game. Giovanni was on the field more than him, so I don't really know what's going on. He was the type of player last year where you couldn't really cut him because he would have an off week, and then all of a sudden he'd explode the next week. So
right.
we're now to week 4, and he's below 10 total fantasy points. So I agree. I think we should cut him. Mark Ingram.
Again, it's a cut. As long as General Mills is on the field, I can't trust him, man, because a lot of teams are just going to dare him to throw. Like he has a big draft neck, but he's not seeing over the defense with the neck. So, so it's like, what else are you going to do with him?
Mm-hmm.
I think the only person that I'm looking forward to on that offense is Brandon Cooks. Outside of that, I feel like he's the only person with relevant value on that offense.
Yeah. I mean, Mark Ingram, 26 carries that first week. Everyone was excited about him. But Tyrod Taylor going down, like you said, General Mills being the quarterback, it's hard to keep Ingram on your team. He only had 6 carries last week. And I know they played from behind, but they were in the game for, 2.5 quarters, and they still were reluctant to give him the ball. So I agree. This is a harder one for me. Robbie Anderson.
If you would have asked me this last week, I would have said yes. But now that Christian McCaffrey is going down, I would be a little bit more patient with him, just because the opportunity is going to be a little bit more there, because you have another mouth. Your biggest mouth that you have to feed is down, essentially. So now it opens up the field a little bit more for him, because I think that they'll do it little by little. DJ Moore is going to get a lot of his normal value, but then I think that calls for somebody else to step up. And I guess that guy it could be Robbie Anderson. It could be Chuba Hubbard. They just traded Dan Arnold. So, he's a guy, I think that there's some value and opportunity there for him. So I would keep him.
Okay, let me ask you this. Would you feel more safe with Robbie on your bench or Terrace Marshall?
I like Robbie a little bit more.
Okay.
But there's not a big difference between, Terrence or Robbie for me. But I just think the familiarity just a little bit more with Donald is what's going to rule in his favor.
Okay.
Thank you, Fidel. You're my favorite person, bro.
Then we got one from Walt, too. Yeah, Phyllis. All right. Next name, Jonnu Smith. Tight ends are hard to come by this season.
Yeah, Jonnu Smith. The tight ends are very hard to come by, like you said. So he's a guy that I'm going to be a little bit more patient with, because of the position that he plays. When we start to get into the who we're going to pick up, I like Jacoby Myers on the Patriots. He's the one that's getting the brunt of the targets for them anyway. But there's still going to be a lot of value for Jacoby, just because he's a tight end, and and he's able to play multi positions. So for that being said, yeah, I would keep him.
Okay. And then last one here, Laviska Shenault.
I'm not 100% confident in Jaguars players, to be perfectly honest. But just because he's able to do a lot of different things, he's a guy that I'm going to be preaching a little bit of patience with, just because his ability to do a lot of things. But within the coming weeks, he's a guy that if he doesn't do something sooner rather than later, you could.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna be patient with him still, just because
Right.
he is still getting at least 4 targets a game. He's not turning them into anything right now. For PPR purposes, I think he's the guy that you have to hold on to. And like you said, it's hard to believe in any of those Jaguars receivers. I want to tell people to cut DJ Chark, and then he ends up with 1 catch, but it turns into a touchdown, so they like that point total. Um, so I don't know. I need someone to emerge from that Jacksonville wide receiver group, and I think Chenault has the best chance of doing so.
Do you think that they're touchdown dependent though, Jaguars? And that's my problem with them. I feel like they're overly touchdown dependent. So I was offered it.
Yeah.
I was offered an interesting trade today. Might I, get to that
Yeah,
of a Jaguars player? So my buddy wanted. He's a Christian McCaffrey owner. So he offered me James Robinson, Odell Beckham, and Lamar Jackson for Derrick Henry. Which is an intriguing trade. I turned it down because it's Derrick Henry. But with that being said, there's a lot of guys who, are thinking about trading, James Robinson. James Robinson did have a big week, 25 points, but he's very touchdown dependent, because the last 2 weeks before last week, he had 8 points and 9 points. Then last week, 25 points. So do you think that those points would be more consistent toward the 8 or 9, or do you think that the 25 will be a little bit more? 25 is a lot, but do you think that he could still, be a little bit lower, maybe 15 to the 13 to 20 range?
You talking Robinson himself?
Yeah, James Robinson, as far as him as a player.
I mean, I still like him. I know it's a different offense and it's a different coaching staff, but Jacksonville played from behind last season the entire year, and he still got his points. And, I mean, he's a good back, so I don't think he's anyone that you want to drop right now, but is he a little touchdown dependent? Yes. Does that change? So I think that the touchdown, though, I think he's going to get like 8 points for sure each and every week. That touchdown can push him up, and then everyone will be excited about it because he's getting at least 15 points. Is he someone that you can start every week? No. So I think you just need to look at the matchup. And, the Cardinals matchup, they don't have a great defense. So, you can expect Jacksonville to score some points in that game, and that's what they did, and it was a closer game.
Yeah.
But I just think you need to analyze each matchup. I don't think you give up on James Robinson. I don't think you give up on LaVisca because I think he's going to be the one that receives the most consistent amount of targets on a weekly basis. Seems like Marvin Jones always finds his targets late in the game in garbage time, so I guess you can keep him because Jacksonville's going to keep losing. But that's kind of how I feel about him.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. Yeah, but next one, who else? What else you got for me?
So that's it on the player. Is there anyone else that you're thinking about cutting right now? Maybe someone who's on your team.
Robert Woods. I don't want to cut him just because.
Cutting him?
No, I'm not thinking about cutting him. It's just I've had a lot of questions about Robert Woods. What do you do with a Robert Woods? And it's just he's not being involved at all in that offense. Cooper Kupp is stealing it. And now last week, Deshaun Jackson was a revelation.
Yeah.
So it's like, again, when you're on an offense with a lot of mouths to feed, it's just like, where do you fit in at? And it's like, I don't feel like he's a guy you start each and every week now. I think he's a guy that, you just do what you will with him. You're not going to drop him off your team, but I don't think that he's a certified, like, I'm confident starting him each and every week.
No, not at this point. And we're in that part of the year now where you have to get away from where you drafted your players. Like, week 4, this is the quarter point of the year. If you drafted Robert Woods in the 3rd round, that doesn't mean you have to start him now. Like, we have to get away from the narrative of, hey, I drafted this guy so high, I have to keep him in my lineup. No. Look at your matchups. When players are cold, players are cold. And that's just how it is. Brandon Ayuk, we saw him through the first 2 weeks. Will he bounce back now after a good game? I don't know. I'm still not going to start him. But that's kind of how we have to approach things. And I know some people went high on Ayuk. Some people are dropping him. And he was drafted, 4th round, 3rd round. I don't know about dropping him, especially after this week. But my main point is you just kind of got to get away from that like where I drafted this player, where I drafted that player. We got to get away from that at this point in the season.
Right.
So that takes me to the next segment. I already brought up Ayuk, so we can stick with him here. Smoke or fire, Brandon Ayuk is back. He can be counted on in your starting lineup each and every week.
Nah,
No?
I don't think so.
Okay.
George Kittle is finally. We seen had a George Kittle sighting. I mean, Debo's still getting a lot of the targets. For them. I think Brandon Ayuk, he's very touchdown dependent, that's where he got his points on the touchdown. And outside of that touchdown, it's just what else is there. So I'm still not 100% sold on him. No,
it was nice to see him involved though. He had 6 targets. He caught 4 of them for 37 yards, 1 touchdown. The big thing to me was he's on the field for 86% of the snaps, and Trent Sherfield didn't take a snap. He wasn't in the game. And that's the guy that was playing above him in the first 2 weeks. So I don't really understand, because I know they like Sherfield. I don't know why he didn't play at all. But if I'm a Brandon Ayuk owner, I'm more excited about him now just because of the level of playing time. And he's averaging like 2.6 yards in YAC, yards after catch. And that's something that he really thrived in last season. I think he was up over 10 on average. So I think the arrow's pointing up, but like you said, I'm not willing to start him yet. But I'm definitely past the part of dropping him. I think if we would have saw like another goose egg performance, I would have thought about dropping him after this.
Yeah.
Do you believe in Odell Beckham Jr.? Is he
back? I absolutely do believe in Odell Beckham Jr. Just because of the injuries of Jarvis Landry, somebody has to catch the ball. The targets is there, and he's Odell Beckham Jr. So it's like you're not going to have him on the field and not give him the ball. Yeah. The question with Odell has never been talent; it's just been injuries. Can he stay healthy? And if Odell can stay healthy, the targets are going to be there. So yeah, for that reason, yes. If he can stay healthy, and you can't really predict health on anybody.
Right.
And so because we can't predict health, that's why I would keep him.
Mm-hmm. I think one big thing that I took away from that game, because I was forced to watch the whole game because I am a Bears fan, and it was Justin Fields' first start, so I wanted to really analyze him, and unfortunately I didn't have a fair game to really analyze him. A lot of that was not his fault. Some of it was. He was pressured on 69% of offensive plays. You can't do that to a rookie quarterback in his first start. But going back to Cleveland, they ran the ball primarily the entire game. And for Odell to see 9 targets, he caught 5 of them. But to see 9 targets in a game where Cleveland is running the ball, very regularly, I think that's a promising sign. And yeah, he had like 13 PPR points, just a little bit above that. Not a crazy performance, but he was the guy when they did pass. They looked his way. And like you said, they have some tight ends on that team, but outside of that, with Landry being hurt, Odell's going to be the guy. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he had a couple big plays, but he wasn't heavily targeted like Odell was. So I believe in him. I think he's a good flex option from here on out. Last one here. Do you believe in Zach Moss yet?
Oh, absolutely. If I had a house, I would put my house on him right now. I have a house, but if I owned my house, I'd put my house on Zach Moss. I think that Zach Moss is the kind of guy where, like, Buffalo, they're a team that wants to run the football, but they just haven't found consistency at the running back position, whether it's him or Devin Singletary. Week 1, we mentioned that he was a healthy scratch, but then you had informed me that he was injured. And I feel like they're slowly but surely trying to ease him back into the game plan. And last week, week 2, he had 15 points. Last week, he has 18. And the carries and the targets are continuing to go up. Yeah. And this week, he has a Houston matchup we mentioned General Mills. Like, it might be a turnover-heavy game for Houston, which gives them a lot of opportunity to have goal line touches and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And you got to look at the schedule. It's not like the AFC East is, a hot division, right now. You play the Jets. What do I always say about the Jets? The Dolphins don't look amazing. Dolphins played well, but
the defensive side of the ball didn't look great.
Yeah, and then the Patriots haven't looked particularly great either. Yeah. So it's like you have those teams, and then their schedule is fairly winnable. When you look at who they play, and that's opportunity for them to score. So I like Zach Moss. I do a lot, and now we're seeing him catch the ball in the backfield. Like he's been targeted as pegged as a goal line running back, and now he's catching the ball out of the backfield. Yeah. So I think he's trustworthy.
And going into the season, we heard that Buffalo wanted to make him more of the lead back and Devin Singletary more of that receiving back. But you mentioned it; he's getting targets now.
Yeah,
and I think they wanted him to take over as the premier back. Week 1, we did, like you said, we found out he was hurt. So he wasn't a healthy scratch. Week 2, he got more involved. It was his first game back from injury. He did fumble. Going into week 3, he's probably not going to be the workhorse. And he turned into the workhorse, kind of. I mean, he had 13 carries for 60 yards. You mentioned the targets. He had 3 targets. He caught all 3. So he's very involved.
Touchdown.
And he had a touchdown, a receiving touchdown at that. And in week 2, he had 2 goal line touchdowns. So they like to give him the touchdown opportunities, and I agree. I think this one's fire. I think Moss is a guy that you need to add if he is in free agencies. I think he's owned in like 64% of ESPN leagues right now. So last week was more of the week to get him, but he's still out there. He's still available. And he could turn into that consistent starter maybe because, like you said, Buffalo wants to run the ball. They don't want their quarterback running the ball and being their lead ball carrier in each and every game.
Yeah.
Paying him too much for that. All right, let's get into some waiver wires. It's Tuesday, so that means tomorrow morning is when the waiver wires need to be submitted and processed. Who are you looking at?
Well, Jacoby Myers is a guy that I'm looking at for one. You know, he's received a fair share of targets. You know, New England this weekend they have Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay secondary isn't 100%. They're looking at Richard Sherman today. You know, so that should tell you how injured their secondary is.
Yeah, they didn't like Matthew Stafford tearing up that secondary.
Right. So I mean, with that being said, I like Jacoby Myers.
Yeah.
If staying on the wide receiver bandwagon, any young Raider that you can get. I love Hunter. I think the guy I'm looking more towards is Hunter Renfrow.
Second in Renfrow is what they're calling him now.
Because Renfrow, he's scored double-digit points in every game this year.
Yeah.
10. I think it was 10, 12, and like 13 as last week. So he's scoring in the double-digit range every single week. You know, Henry Ruggs is looking like a guy too. You know, he had a whopping 22 points week 2. Last week, you know, he had double-digit points as well. Mm-hmm. Brian Edwards is a guy that he's getting points. So I'm looking at any Raider wide receiver. Like they're all equally involved until Josh Jacobs is back. They're more of a throw team. You know, Peyton Barber was a guy who had a big week last week. You know.
Yeah. Real quick. So what's the latest on Josh Jacobs? Because obviously we saw what Peyton Barber did in his absence, and we always need more running backs in fantasy. But if Jacobs is going to come back soon, Barber's not a guy that you would want to submit a waiver claim on. But if he's going to miss extended time, he would be someone I would be looking at for waiver wires.
Absolutely. Because of what you just said, I would stay firmly away from him because based on what John Gruden said is that he should be cleared for turf this week or not turf but grass this week. Mm-hmm. But they're going to ease him back in the lineup. And with the record that they have 3-0, they're really not in a rush to bring him back. But with the extended day with it being Monday, he could play. He could very well play. So I would be really patient when it comes to, you know, Josh Jacobs owners. Like I'm not getting rid of Josh Jacobs. I wouldn't, and I'm not in a hurry to add Peyton Barber neither. That's why I said a lot of their wide receivers because they're very much a pass heavy team. And Derek Carr has 6 straight 300-yard games dating back to last year. So that tells me that they're tending to pass the ball a little bit. Than running.
So Peyton could be more of the guy that you let him go through waivers. If he's still there after waivers, why not?
Yeah, why not? You know, just why? Yeah, well, he's a why not kind of guy. Like, he reminds me of a Trey Sermon. Like, I got Trey Sermon last week. You know, last minute because you know reports all week were who was the running back. He hasn't been cleared yet. So because of he hasn't passed concussion protocol yet, he was still there. So then Saturday morning, I found out his status and I added him. You know, so he's on that wavelength of a Trey Sermon last week. And you know, running backs by committee is always kind of a tough situation to kind of navigate. Mm-hmm. You know, but it's just keeping an eye on an injury report, seeing what it is, and then if you see him and you need a running back, Adam. And another guy you should add is Chuba Hubbard.
Speaking of injuries, right?
Speaking of injuries, because of Christian McCaffrey, so Chuba Hubbard is a guy that is an attractive. I feel like he's going to be the number one added waiver player this week because of the injury. I don't like him particularly this week because I respect the Dallas Cowboys defense. They're the number one generated turnover defense in all the league right now. So and it's hard to run against them.
It's hard to run against them if Miles Sanders has 2 total carries in the game, though.
True, that is very true.
So I don't know if we should go off of what we saw last night when we analyzed running backs going against that team, because Philly just completely got away from that game plan. You know how Carolina Panthers running backs are when CMC's hurt.
Yeah, that is
Mike
true
Davis
too. That's
go
very
in
true.
there, and it's not like they're going to see CMC numbers, but I think that if you need a good 10, 15 points, you can rely on that from Hubbard. He had 10.9 PPR points, and CMC went down. Was it second quarter?
Yeah, second quarter. Yep.
It wasn't even a full game, and he still got double-digit fantasy points.
Yeah.
And they're going to be involved in the passing game. He did have 11 carries for 52 yards, but he was targeted heavily as a receiver out of the backfield. So I don't know if it's yeah, you're right. It's not the best matchup, but I don't know if I'm going to stay away from him. And
I'm not staying away from him. I'm saying like this week, I don't know. I don't know if he's the best start in the world, but I'm still adding him regardless.
Well, if you're using a waiver claim on him, though,
yeah,
you're probably only going to get 2 weeks of him being running back 1.
That is very true.
So if you think he's worthy of one, I think he's got to be in your lineup.
Yeah, true.
So who are some other players? We were on the wide receivers for a little bit.
Oh yeah,
how about Christian Kirk?
Yeah, no, I like Christian Kirk. If people didn't get Rondale Moore last week, I like Rondale Moore. But yeah, Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore. They're a team, the Cardinals, that like to throw the ball a lot. That there's going to be a lot of volume there. So Christian Kirk's another guy that I believe has had double-digit points all 3 weeks. He was probably shy last week, probably.
He had 9.5.
About 9.5. Yeah,
three receptions for 65 yards, though. I mean, if that's his worst game of the season,
I'm happy
with it.
Yeah, I definitely would take that. So, yeah, I like Christian Kirk.
Yeah, and he had 8 targets this past week. Caught 7 of them, 104. Didn't see the end zone. He found the end zone twice in week 1, but he's a guy that you can really, count on as a flex option on a week-to-week basis.
Here's a question here for tight end Dalton Schultz.
Oh yeah, he's on my
list.
Like him?
Yep. Okay.
I just posted a waiver wire article on the East West Football Network website last night. Dalton Schultz was on there. He was my only tight end. Surprisingly enough, he finished as the tight end 1 of week 3. And Dak likes targeting him, and I know everyone's concerned about Blake Jarwin seeing some targets, and I am concerned about that, but it was the Dalton Schultz coming out party last night. Caught 6 of 7 targets for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. That last one was a garbage time touchdown. I was surprised that they were still throwing the ball, but you can see it. He's targeted, and his one incompletion, he just absolutely got smoked. It was a seam route up the middle early in the game. It would have been like 35 yards. So Dak likes targeting him, and with Amari Cooper with cracked ribs, he's playing through it. I don't really like him right now. He looks off. He's hindering that ribs on the left side, and he's running out of bounds. He's staying away from contact. So I think it's the CeeDee Lamb show, even though we didn't see much of him last night because of the blowout win. And Schultz is very heavily targeted, as well as the running backs as well.
Absolutely, I agree.
I don't think there's another tight end that I'm really looking for to use a waiver claim on, though. He's the only one that looks enticing to me. So a name that you brought up earlier, though, Giovanni Bernard. He's available in a lot of leagues. Would you be willing? Let's say you're thin at running back. A lot of teams are out there. Would you be willing to submit a waiver claim on him?
Me personally, no. Like I said, I'm a lot of the times when it comes to running back, I'm a huge volume guy. There's just a lot of mouths to feed out there. But I think an encouraging sign, I don't want to say encouraging, but Gronk going down and me not knowing the status of Gronk, Scotty Miller is out. So they do. Antonio Brown is still on the COVID list. So they do have a lot of injuries out there. So he could get creeping with some playing time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And I would keep my eyes, since we're speaking on running backs, on the Patriots running back situation, because they just lost James White. So whoever kind of takes over that, catch the ball out of the backfield type of running for the Patriots, I'm keeping my eye on him. Maybe not this week, but next week, just to see how they look.
And they're trying out players right now.
They're trying out players, but we already know that that's a big, there's a big opportunity there. If you're a Patriots running back, they love targeting the running back out of the backfield. So, Damian, I'm big. I've been big on Damian Harris. He didn't have a big week last week, but he's a guy that could get more, opportunity and more targets now that James White is out. But whoever takes James White's spot is the running back that, since they do the same thing as Giovanni Bernard, that I would look at, that type of, that situation. Fluid.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of stuck on Gio right now.
I am too.
Like we brought it up earlier that Ronald Jones is nearly out of the Buccaneers game plan right now. On the season, he's got 15 carries for 52 yards in 3 total games. And, Gio played a lot in this last game. They played from behind. He saw, I think it was like 84% of the snaps. But when you do play from behind, you primarily have that third down back in there. Leonard Fournette's not known as a guy that's a great pass catcher, so it made sense for him to play a lot. And in 3 games, he's got 13 receptions for 79 yards and 1 touchdown, which is okay for a running back that's probably serving time on your bench. But he hasn't had a single carry, so I mean he's not going to get any carries. And if Tampa's up, I don't know how much he plays. So
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, he's an interesting one. What about Alexander Mattison?
It just depends on the health of Dalvin Cook. With Dalvin Cook's in the game, I don't know how much opportunity he will get, but he's a good running back to own just because of Dalvin Cook. Just I'm not gonna say he's never healthy, but it's like there are those games where, like last week, where he doesn't play, and I don't really know his injury status coming in the next week. So he's a guy I would definitely add. If
you can find him,
if you can find him,
what you just said earlier, I think a lot of people were already monitoring that.
Right.
Because he's owned in 70% of leagues right now.
Right.
And this is before the breakout performance. So people know the narrative of Dalvin Cook.
Right. And so, with that being said, that's what I'm saying. Like games where he's out, Dalvin Cook is out, I'm throwing him in, and I'm confident in starting him, so yeah. Okay.
Here's another wide receiver, Tim Patrick. We know that Judy's going to miss a lot of time. We just found out that KJ Hamler has a torn ACL. He actually had some more damage to other ligaments on his leg as well. So it sounds like it's going to be a longer recovery than a normal torn ACL. But, Cortland Sutton being a little inconsistent. Tim Patrick's been the most consistent wide receiver on that team. He's had double-digit fantasy points in each of his first 3 games. He hasn't fallen short of 12 PPR points, and he's the wide receiver 31. Would you be willing to submit a waiver claim on him?
Yeah, absolutely. For all the reasons that you just said, a lot of injuries, a lot of opportunity. Cortland Sutton, and this week, I know we look at the Ravens and we're like, oh my God, it's the Ravens defense, but Ravens secondary has been struggling a little bit. They've been giving up some points without Marcus Peters. So it's a good matchup. The Broncos have played a very favorable schedule thus far. And they've allowed. Teddy Bridgewater, I believe, has attempted the 3rd most deep ball throws in fantasy football, and not just in fantasy football, but just in general. Right. So, with that reason being said, Tim Patrick is getting those opportunities. So, I definitely would.
Okay. What about some quarterbacks that you're looking at? I know we always talk about Derek Carr. He's always, underrated. We've talked about Daniel Jones the past couple of weeks, but what do you think about Sam Darnold? Are you looking at him? Maybe not as a waiver claim, just adding him on your roster.
Yeah, no, I like Sam Darnold. I think again, you look at the schedule; it's a very favorable schedule that he's been playing. Mm-hmm. And now with Christian McCaffrey going down a little bit, they're going to be throwing the ball around. And the thing too that I'm seeing is that he's getting running touchdowns. Yeah. A lot of his touchdowns have been running touchdowns. So they're letting him use his legs a little bit more. And Joe Brady and those guys in Carolina are using it more in a creative way. And another quarterback I'm looking at this week, if he's available, Joe Burrow against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't like the Jaguars defense at all. Joe Burrow has found chemistry, or he's already had chemistry with Jamar Chase, but that chemistry it's taken its way to the NFL. Jamar Chase is on his way to breaking a lot of rookie records, and they seem to want to throw the ball, down there, and they're confident in throwing the ball with him. So this week is a good matchup, especially on a short week, and the Jaguars just traded one of their corners, CJ Henderson. I
was confused by that. I mean, he was the 9th overall pick in last year's NFL draft, and you're already giving up on him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it. I know they added, was it Tyson Campbell in the second round this year? I didn't understand it. I mean, good move for Carolina after their rookie standout cornerback went down, J.C. Horn. So that made a lot of sense for them. They didn't really use Dan Arnold that much, but for Jacksonville to move on from a former top 10 pick and just 1 year into his career is crazy to me.
Absolutely. But yeah, and for those reasons, I like Joe Burrow. Mm-hmm. I just think that there's a lot of opportunity there for him to be successful. It's a home game for them as well. So yeah, I like Burrow this week.
Okay. This isn't a guy that you're going to find available in a ton of leagues right now, but he looks like he's emerging as a very consistent fantasy quarterback. Kirk Cousins. Are we starting to believe in him at this point? He's had he posted 22 fantasy points in week 1, and then 2 consecutive 25-point outings, week 2 and 3. Do you like him?
No, I've always liked Kirk Cousins. I think because Kirk Cousins, he's on a team with a lot of weapons. Mm-hmm. You got Jefferson, you got Thielen. KJ Osborne now. We mentioned Dalvin Cook. We mentioned Alexander Madison. So he has a lot of things around him, and they show him confidence in throwing the ball and using him. So I've always been a Kirk Cousins guy. I think that there's a lot of narratives. Can he win playoff games? This, that, and the third. That has nothing to do with fantasy football, though. He's always been a very consistent fantasy football. Now, being a consistent quarterback in real life, I mean, that's neither here nor there, but we're talking about fantasy football. And for fantasy football sakes, yes, I definitely like him.
I'm cool with him losing every game as a Bears fan and then posting good fantasy points.
And fantasy points, yeah. I mean, it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get into some streamers that you're looking at. We talked about Sam Darnold a little bit. We didn't really talk too much about his matchup against Dallas. Do you like streaming Sam Darnold this week? Let's say over players like, I don't know. I didn't really have one in mind, I guess. Like Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins going against Cleveland. Would you rather start Darnold or Cousins?
I'm gonna say Kirk Cousins.
Okay.
Even though and people may look at me because the Browns had an amazing week, but you're not going against a Matt Nagy offense. No offense.
Taken. I want him out just as much as any Bears fan out there.
I think the Browns defense, they have all the potential to be great. They have all the players to be great, but they just still have that. They just still haven't been consistent. Yeah. I think last week was a game to where it helped build your confidence, but this is a much better offense.
I'm not scared of quarterbacks going against Cleveland for fantasy because of what they have on defense. I'm scared of them going against them because they like to run the ball. They like to control time of possession. Yeah. They don't give you a lot of opportunities. There's a reason why Justin Fields had 2 passing attempts in the first half. Now, granted, he got sacked like 4 times in the first half, but they limit your chances of opportunities, and that's the only reason why I'd be a little skeptical about Kirk Cousins.
A little bit. But I still am a little bit skeptical with Christian McCaffrey just because, not Christian McCaffrey, Sam Darnold, because
of Christian McCaffrey.
Because of Christian McCaffrey, he's a guy that you're targeting an awful lot. DJ Moore is going to be on Trayvon Diggs, and Diggs has been a shutdown corner thus far. Mm-hmm. He's been playing solid cornerback play. And I'm still trying to figure out what other wide receiver is going to step up. We mentioned Robbie Anderson earlier. You asked me about Marshall earlier. I mean, Chuba Hubbard hasn't played a whole hell of a lot. So there's just a lot of variables there to me that I have questions. Mm-hmm. Dan Arnold is gone. So I still have a lot of questions, like with not with him generally, but just that particular game and particular matchup, what it looks like, So that's why I'm a little bit more comfortable with Kirk Cousins, because there's less variables of me questioning.
Yeah, and we don't have to get into this player too much, but you brought it up once again. Dan Arnold's gone, so maybe keep an eye on that rookie Tommy Tremble. They did get him involved. He had that carry on the outside for a touchdown, so he could turn into a tight end that you would keep your eyes out on. So who is a quarterback that you're looking to stream this week then?
I said I like Burrow. I still like
Anyone else?
I'm good with Burrow.
Okay. What about Jimmy G against Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good thing. Seattle they're not the Legion of Boom anymore. Far from that, and quarterbacks have been getting points on Seattle's defense.
And he's going to be available.
And he's going to be available. And he had a confident booster last week of a game. He had a great game last week.
And Kirk Cousins destroyed that secondary last week.
So
I'm looking at him too for the reasons that we just said, and because of the running back situation in San Fran. The lack of healthy running backs, I expect Jimmy G to be passing a little bit more than they want to. And then Seattle's a bottom 5 team in passing yards allowed. Anyone else before we go to tight ends?
Nothing. No one else really seems to come to mind right now. So we can move to tight ends.
All right. So who are you thinking about streaming for tight ends this week?
We talked about him. Dalton Schultz is a guy that I think that he may ride the hot hand because of the reasons that you said with Amari Cooper's not looking 100% with the ribs. The Cowboys are a team that likes to run the football, so the play actions are there. And like you said earlier, Dak likes throwing the ball and targeting him. Mm-hmm. So he's the one guy. If we had to stream a tight end, it could be him. It would more than likely be him. So definitely like him.
Yeah, and he's third in the team in targets, third in receptions, third in receiving yards, and then tied for second in receiving touchdowns. I know he had his 2 just last night, but no one else has really been a touchdown target very consistently for Dallas, at least. Okay, what about – so I have on here – I have Austin Hooper.
Okay.
In a game where Cleveland didn't pass the ball a ton, because we talked about it with Odell, he still was fantasy relevant. Now, it's because he had a touchdown. He had 2 receptions for 19 yards, but he's got a matchup against Minnesota, and their defense lacks, a ton of talent. Their secondary is pretty atrocious, and it's going to be a game where I told you Cleveland wants to control the time of possession, but if Minnesota gets out early, Cleveland can play the type of game where it is a shootout. We saw it with Kansas City in week 1. So I could see Hooper getting a lot of targets in this game. What do you think? Would you be willing?
Oh, yeah. Because of the situation that, like you just mentioned, I definitely agree. There's a lot of opportunities with the Jarvis Landry injuries, a team that likes to run the football. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for him. So, yeah, I definitely like the Austin Hooper match.
What about Dawson Knox?
Oh, here's another guy I could slide before I answer the Dawson Knox question.
Okay.
How do you feel about O.J. Howard? Because we don't know Gronk's status.
Okay, well, what I've been hearing is Gronk has been telling the media there's no way he's not playing against New England.
So there's no way he's not playing?
And they're not saying he's a for sure in, but Gronk's going to do everything in his power to be in that game, man.
Yeah.
There's no way that he's going to miss that game. And we saw before Gronk was even targeted against LA, they have another tight end that they like using, Cameron Brate. So I don't know how to feel about OJ Howard. He's a guy that I was really excited about coming out of college, but he tore his Achilles.
Yeah.
And usually players are not the same. He would be a guy if Gronk is for sure listed as out. Let's say we find out tomorrow or Thursday. I would look at him. And we brought it up a couple times. Tight ends are hard to come by in fantasy. There aren't a lot of them that are very consistent. But I don't know if I could pull the trigger on OJ.
Yeah, me neither.
I think they would look at Cameron Brate just a little bit more.
But but to answer Dawson Knox question, it's a difficult thing because it's consistency. Mm-hmm. Like you still have Cole Beasley who's getting targeted a lot and who's been getting targeted a lot. They have Stephon Diggs. Emmanuel Sanders is a guy that a lot of people have been talking about waiver wire, putting waiver wire claims for. there's just Zach. We mentioned Zach Moss, so there's a lot of mouths to feed, and I just don't see Dawson Knox being a consistent weapon each and every week.
But he sort of has been.
He has been, but I don't know, man.
He had 8 in week 1, 9.7 last week, 14.9 this week.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and he's coming off his best game. He had 5 targets, 4 receptions, 49 yards, and a tutty. So,
but do you think he's touchdown dependent though? That's my question.
Sure, but Josh Allen's going to throw 4 or 5 each week in a good matchup. And
Texans.
They play Houston.
It's a good matchup, yeah. So, I mean, yeah. Now that you put it that way, yeah, I wouldn't mind that. I definitely wouldn't, as a good stream. That's a pretty good streaming option.
And Houston's allowed the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends, so far this season. So, I don't know if I like him more than Schultz, but if you can't grab a guy like Schultz and you need a streamer, a plug-in in an emergency situation, I think I'd pick Knox over Hooper.
Yeah.
Let's go to defenses. Who are you looking at for this week? The team playing the Jets, right?
It's the Titans. Yeah.
There it is.
You do look at the team, but the Titans defense just hasn't. I don't know, man. Like I'm not 100% on the Titans defense.
Do you believe in the Jets offense more than the Titans defense?
I don't believe in the Jets offense at all.
There you go. So I think you found your answer.
Yeah. I wouldn't be mad at it. I wouldn't have a problem with it. I know in a lot of my leagues, the Saints defense has been available for whatever reason. I like the Saints, this week as well. They got against the Giants. The Giants' offense is pretty pathetic.
It is.
I don't understand why they're so pathetic, but they're pathetic. And really quick, if we're talking about streaming options, Kadarius Toney wouldn't be a bad streaming option.
What?
Because
Toney?
Okay, look, Sterling Shepard has a hamstring injury.
Tell me. Yep, go ahead.
Yep. So, as Darius Slayton has a hamstring injury, so he wouldn't be a bad option. I'm not 100. Like I said, I'm not 100% happy with the Giants offense, and I wouldn't want a Giants player, but I mean, Kadarius Toney's not a bad option, but
I just don't know if I can believe in a guy that has 14 career NFL receiving yards.
Yeah, me neither. I don't either, but
that's my problem.
I think injuries may have opportunity there because of injuries.
Okay.
But back to the defense. Like if the Saints defense is available, which has been available in a lot of my leagues, that's one I'm considering streaming just because like the Giants just they're a very inconsistent defense. Offense. Like they just. They have the star power. They got everything that you need, but the way that they look against the Falcons last week, it just wasn't good. The play calling just isn't good. Who do your Bears play? This?
Oh, they play Detroit, so they're a streaming option for me. And real quick about the Bears, I'm not talking about their offense anymore. Everyone knows about it. Everyone's pissed off about it. Even Lions fans are mad about Matt Nagy. I don't know why. I mean, talk to Walt. He wants Nagy fired. If I was Walt, I'd be loving it. But the Bears are owned in about 14% of leagues right now. Last week, they lost 26-6, but the defense played amazing. And no one would know that because of the final score. And they wouldn't know that because Cleveland had 9 sacks. So that was the big headline. Justin Fields getting murdered out there, Cleveland getting to him 9 times. But Chicago had 5 sacks of their own. And Cleveland has one of the best offensive lines in the league. We're seeing Robert Quinn. He has 4 sacks this season, more than what he had last year. Khalil Mack has had a sack in each of his last 2 games. And they can generate turnovers. Cleveland wasn't passing the ball, and so that's why they didn't really turn the ball over, and we were down the whole game. But you're going against that Lions team that I know they have a good offensive line, but if you can dismantle Cleveland's offensive line, I think you can dismantle Detroit's. And Jared Goff, when he's under pressure, he's a different type of quarterback. When he's got a clean pocket, he looks like a top 15 guy. But when he's under rush and he's under duress, he's bad. And that's why Sean McVay kicked him out. So I like the Bears this week. I'm not saying they're going to win the game because I have no idea what they're going to do on offense, but their defense.
Who's starting for you guys this week?
Oh, it could be Andy Dalton. It could be Justin Fields. It could be Nick Foles. That's pretty much.
I don't like that at all. I don't like that at all.
Matt Nagy is a clown.
When you say it could be 3 people, I don't like that.
He is someone that doesn't like he doesn't like saying that it's his fault. Obviously, it's not all his fault, but he doesn't like taking any credit for any poor play. He did not have a game plan for Justin. Nope. Fields did not play well, but you don't have to say, well, this is why we lost. I don't have any words for this. I am disappointed in our team. Foles could start. You already know what Foles can do for this offense. We saw it last year. Now, if Andy's healthy, I mean, he said it last week. If Andy was healthy, he'd be the starter. So that wouldn't look too horrible. But if you're going to start Foles over Fields, you got to go.
Yeah. No, and that's what I'm saying. And it's not we're scapegoating him as if, well, how many rollouts did you call? You know your offensive line isn't very good.
There were no bootleg. That's what I was telling
him. Nothing like
in the Sunday pregame show. I was talking to Walt. I said, what I don't want to see happen is him stay in the pocket and just get hit. How many design plays did we see him rolling out? Speed options, anything.
Knowing that your offensive line is that bad, it's like, bro. And Myles Garrett said, I don't even think they were trying, to be honest with you. He was like, everything was predictable. And it was predictable.
And there was no halftime adjustment. They did the same exact thing. They had 5 sacks in the first half. They had 4 in the second half. We did nothing different. And that's when you know you don't have a good head coach. When you can't change your game plan.
Right.
Okay, there's a lot of heat going on Sirianni for Philly. We saw some halftime adjustments. Now, Philly didn't come and make a miraculous comeback, but they generated more yards in the second half. They made adjustments. Matt Nagy made none.
0.
I don't want to. Nope. We got to stop talking about this. I could talk about this for hours. But yeah, Bears, I think they're a decent streaming option. Tennessee's a decent one as well. I didn't even think about New Orleans. You're right. They're owned in about half of leagues right now. So they would probably be my number one defense to look at, especially with that Giants matchup for sure. Anything else you want to go over? Any big name or big stardom, situms players that you want to?
Okay, yeah, I actually have one.
Okay.
I'm in a fantasy football group chat. You know, I see a lot of my friends picking up Josh Gordon. The Chiefs just added him.
I want to like Josh. I really do.
Don't you? Like, if there's those dispensaries in Missouri, I'm okay with it. But I want to know his status. You know, like COVID status. I want to know his like drug test status.
Yeah.
Because he has all the talent.
Physical. He passes
He has all the talent in the world. He's in an offense that's is pretty much struggling right now. Like, you hate to say the Chiefs offense is struggling right now, but outside of Travis Kelce, there's not a consistent go.
Tyreek Hill is not consistent anymore. 2 weeks in a row of missing that double-digit point total.
Yeah, and so that's why you bring in a Josh Gordon.
You need another. And I was telling Walt in the Sunday pregame show, I think they're fine, and they're not. And I was wrong. And then they signed Josh Gordon, and he was telling me they need another guy. And this could be that other guy. Maybe he's not a guy that will light it up in fantasy, but he will bring defenders noticing him.
You said light it up, Josh Gordon.
Wow. I shouldn't have done that.
Josh, okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But you're probably not. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. My bad.
You know what? Real quick, though, they're allowed to smoke weed after the season. How do you think he feels? A guy that can't ever get away from it, and then they changed the rule after this year.
I mean, that's probably why they let him back. But that's the thing. It's like, what is his mindset coming into game? That's I don't know, man. Like, I would like you said. I want to like Josh Gordon so much. Like, he has all the intangibles and talent.
He's a great receiver.
He's a great wide receiver. It's just, oh my God, it's just the other stuff, you know. But then it's just a situation, because it's like I don't want it to be a Le'Veon Bell situation like last year. Yeah. Because the moment Le'Veon Bell signed with the Chiefs last year, you're like, oh my God, I gotta get Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell's the perfect addition, and they didn't use Le'Veon Bell. So
and that had to do with locker room issues, and
right,
saying he'll never play for Andy Reid ever again.
Right. So
there's more to it.
What is Le'Veon? That's what I'm saying. It's like, where do they see Josh Gordon? Like, what is his role? Where do they see him? But
I think they want to line him up outside, opposite of Tyreek, let McCole Hardman run the slot, and open up more of the field.
Yeah.
And as a defender, you're not going to just look away from Josh Gordon. He's too talented. He's too good.
Right.
And I know we haven't seen much of him the past couple of years, but no one's going to argue his talent.
Right.
So I think it's a good move.
Okay.
I think it's going to help Tyreek Hill get back into his dominance in fantasy football as well, because he's being double, triple teamed right now. Travis Kelce's still getting his, but Tyreek Hill has been a major disappointment the last couple of weeks, and unfortunately, I have him on one of my teams. And you're not going to just bench a Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, like I've been seeing the Josh, Allen or Josh Gordon. Why do I keep saying Allen? Josh Gordon needle moving up. So.
But who's someone you're looking to start this week? I mean, surely you're not going to start Josh Gordon if he does find his way
what position? Who like just any position?
I mean, okay, let's go with some running backs. What do you think about Miles Sanders this week? We just talked about how he had only 2 carries, and Miles Sanders is a guy that's hard to bench, but running backs, there's not a lot of them out there. Are you going to start him against Kansas City?
If I had him, I'm immediately looking for Zach Moss, and I'm throwing Zach Moss in his position. Okay. Me personally,
yeah.
That would be my start of the. If you need a streamer, that's my streamer. Would be Zach Moss because of the Houston Texans, and I just think the opportunities are going to be there.
And they'll probably be winning most of the games too. They're going to run the ball a lot.
Right.
Yeah, good point.
Be Zach Moss. My quarterback would be Joe Burrow, as I mentioned earlier, because of the Jaguars defense.
Okay.
I mean, some of the wide receivers that I'm looking at, I think that Raiders-Chargers Monday Night Football game is going to be a high-scoring affair. Oh, yeah. So I'm liking a lot of the Raiders' younger receivers, like I mentioned earlier. The Renfros of the world, the Henry Ruggs of the world.
Are you giving up on Bryan Edwards?
I like Bryan Edwards a lot, but I think that when it comes to Derek Carr, he's not 100% trustworthy of that offensive line yet. And so he has a very, very quick release. Yeah. So that's why I would say Renfro, because he's going to consistently target Renfro, especially on third down, because he's looking to get the ball out of his hands, right? So with that being said, that's why I would morally target Renfro, just because of that. Mm-hmm. Bryan Edwards is more the X receiver. They've been using him in slot and all these different positions, moving him around in a lot of different ways. So he's a guy that is getting a lot of opportunities. One more guy I want to say, not Raiders related, but Ravens. Rashad Bateman is coming back this week, and after the game Marquise Brown had this past Sunday, dropping 3 wide open passes that I don't understand why you would drop those. They're hurrying up trying to get Rashad Bateman back. Right? It's just I don't know how he dropped them. So they're hurrying up to try to get Rashad Bateman back in the lineup. Yeah. So Rashad Bateman is a guy that I would keep an eye on, and I would add him, and stash him, because he's a guy that I think that Lamar is gonna want to target a lot.
So maybe wait a week though before.
Yeah, I would wait a week. I'm not starting him this week, but I'm picking him up waiver.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. For stardom sit-em purposes, you were a little skeptical on Tennessee's defense against the Jets. Would you start Corey Davis against them? He had 10 targets last week. He's seen at least 5 in his first 3 games. He is their wide receiver 1.
Yeah.
Would you start him?
I think I would. I would start him.
Tennessee's given up the 3rd most fantasy points to
wide receivers. I don't like Tennessee's defense. I don't care what and it's the Jets, and I have that philosophy. I'm starting anybody versus the Jets, but I don't like Tennessee's defense. And like you said, 3rd most points. The question: Who's taking AJ Brown's spot?
Adam Humphries.
No, there was that one. There was another.
Oh yeah, he's got that hyphenated last name.
Yeah, that guy.
I don't know his name.
I don't know.
He
his
had
name
a touchdown though.
And I've been seeing his name. I've been seeing a lot of movement with his name on the waiver wire.
Yeah, and AJ Brown is definitely a guy you gotta monitor that injury. We thought that he was healthy coming into the game. He wasn't. I don't know if he's going to play this week. So I'm looking up that guy's name though. I want to get that down.
He's a guy that's been mentioned a lot on the waiver wire, and again, the matchup against the Jets is a pretty good matchup for him. He had some relevancy last week. He scored a lot of points last week.
Nick Westbrook, and I don't know how to pronounce the last part. Akeen.
Okay,
it's Ikhine. We can just call him Nick Westbrook.
No relation to Russ.
No.
But
4 receptions, 53 yards, 1 touchdown, led the team in receiving yards. led the team in receptions, led the team in targets. I mean, well, why not? If A.J. Brown's going to miss time, you could – I don't know if I'd use a waiver claim on the guy, but he's probably going to be available in a lot of leagues after waivers process tomorrow morning. And then he could be a plug-in guy as a flex option after seeing what he did in week 3.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. What would you do with Will Fuller?
They targeted him a lot over the top, in overtime, not just in overtime, but throughout the game.
Mm-hmm.
He's a guy that they don't really. He's always been a deep threat. He's always been a guy that you target deep. But at this juncture with Jacoby Brissett starting at quarterback, I don't know how many deep ball opportunities they're going to get. He's a guy that can extend the play with his legs, But right now it seems like they're targeting Jalen Waddell a little bit more.
Yeah.
And Mike Gesicki a little bit more. Like he's more of a I'm going to target my security blanket type of quarterback, Yeah. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure at all.
I just like the amount of targets he got.
Yeah.
And you're a guy that watched the whole game because he went against your Raiders. I didn't get to see a lot of it because I was trying to watch my Bears.
A lot of deep balls. That's literally where they saw him.
And he must not have hauled in any of them because he caught 3 passes for 20 yards. He had a 2-point conversion.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would look at him. He's available in about 40% of leagues right now.
Nyheim Hines too is another guy I would look at off a waiver wire. He's at this point he's getting more volume than Jonathan Taylor is, which is crazy.
Hines just bothers me. Same thing with J.D. McKissick. He'll have a great week. You want to put him in your starting lineup, he'll give you 3. You bench him. You don't believe in him because he just got you 3, puts up 19. I mean, what do you do with that? I mean, you got to keep him on your roster, I guess. But I don't know. I mean, it seems like he's on an every other game situation right now.
Right.
That's tough.
But with the Marlon Mack, he's rumored to be traded. He's a guy, like I said before, like he's doing a little bit more than Jonathan Taylor is currently. Mm-hmm. So Nyheim Hines is a guy that I wouldn't mind adding. And just like you said, there's boom or bust opportunity depending on the matchup, right? But he's a guy I would add just because of, opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Any other guys that you're looking to start this week?
Nah.
Good matchups?
Taylor
Heineke against the Falcons.
I picked on the Falcons defense last week and I paid for it because I started Daniel Jones and he didn't do much. So
I don't know. He didn't play bad though.
No, he didn't do bad. He just didn't score a lot of touchdowns. And the weapons. A lot of hamstring injuries. For his wide receivers. So, man. But the Falcons defense. I don't know if last week was a fluke. But Taylor Heineke, that's not a bad matchup for him at all.
Yeah, and he scored over 20 points in 2 consecutive games. He had a lot of garbage time points last week because he was playing from behind against Buffalo. But if you need a quarterback, you need a quarterback. So it wouldn't be a bad guy to look at to stream this week. Any other comments before we hop off here?
No, I'm pretty much done.
All right. If you're 0-3 out there, don't panic. You can still come back from this. It's a 17-week schedule this year, so there's plenty of time to turn that team around. So that's just my advice. I have a couple teams that are 1-2. I'm not worried about it yet. There's a lot of players that are underperforming that are big name players. Tyreek Hill's one of them. We saw Zeke 1 underperform in week 1. A lot of people tried to trade him, and look what he did last night.
George Kittle.
Yep. So that's my piece of advice for anyone that's starting to panic a little bit. I know there's a couple guys that have been texting me about starting out 0-3 and what do I do? If you like your roster, just be patient and just add some depth pieces. That's all you got to do. All right, but that wraps it up here with the Fantasy GMs today. Make sure to keep up to date on all of your fantasy news on the East West Football Network website. We will see you next week. Happy fantasying.